Hello, I'm Dr. Sally Enzoll, Chief Executive Officer of United Through Reading, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to the third webinar in the Reading and Resiliency series. As those of you who have previously heard, this webinar series highlights how resiliency through reading is attainable, accessible, and adaptable for every child in our diverse military community. Last month, we addressed building community through military family literacy, and you heard a very lively discussion between three leading advocates in our community. Cynthia Curiel is the Sector Vice President for Communications at Northrop Grumman Aeronautics Systems. Dr. Patrick Bingham is an Army veteran, a career educator, the spouse of Army Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham, and a member of the Board of Directors of the Military Child Education Coalition. And Harriet Dominique, who is the Senior Vice President, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Corporate Responsibility Officer at USAA, and also the President of the USAA Foundation and the USAA Educational Foundation. You can watch last month's webinar on our website at utr.org/webinars. It was excellent, and I think you'd really enjoy it if you missed it. For those of you who are new to United Through Reading, we keep military families reading together no matter the distance between them. For 32 years, we have helped families stay connected through video recorded story time to help ease that stress of separation, to maintain that positive emotional connection, and to cultivate a love of reading and early childhood literacy. Service members can read, record, and send a story and a book to their families from more than 200 recording locations around the world, as well as on their mobile devices using our free and secure reading app. And since 1989, more than 2.5 million military family members and service members have benefited from the program. United Through Reading and our military families are really fortunate to have strong advocates on Capitol Hill. So here to share a little bit about his work is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith.
Hello, I'm Adam Smith. I'm the congressman who represents the 9th District for the state of Washington, and I want to express my strong support for the United Through Reading program. It helps on so many levels. Our service members who are deployed overseas, one of the greatest hardships of that is being separated from their family and separated from their children. United Through Reading is a way for those service members to stay connected with their family. Certainly, it is incredibly helpful to the family and to the children, and it also helps with the reintegration process when the service members return home from overseas deployment. They need our help to reintegrate, connect with their families, and United Through Reading is a great way to do it, great way to stay in touch while you're overseas. And the other part of this that I'm really passionate about is the educational aspect for the children. What we have learned through the scientific study of the brain and how it develops, nothing is more important with young children than communicating with them. Reading is a great way to do that. Language is how they develop mentally. Certainly, it prepares them for reading and learning, but it prepares them for every aspect of life. I think if as a parent, you can only do one thing for your child, basically in utero through, their childhood years, read to them. That will help the brain develop and give them the best chance to have a successful life. So United Through Reading is a win-win program. Helps the service members, helps their family, and really helps childhood development. So I thank UTR for their incredible work on this and pledge my support. I'm pleased to work on this issue with Mike Rogers, who is congressman from Alabama, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, where I am the chairman. Our committee wants to do everything we possibly can to support our service members, and United Through Reading is a great program to help do that. So I just express my strong support for UTR, and I want to thank all service members and their families for their service and for their sacrifices to protect this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Our military families are really fortunate to have you working for them every single day. And now I'm incredibly excited to share with you a critical conversation with the Executive Director of the White House's Military Families Program, Joining Forces. Rory Brosius is a Special Assistant to the President and the Executive Director of Joining Forces at the White House, where she oversees a policy portfolio that includes economic opportunity, military child education, and the health and well-being for the families of service members and veterans, their caregivers, and their survivors. She has served as a social impact consultant, and she previously served as a Deputy Director of Joining Forces during the Obama administration. A clinical social worker and spouse of a Marine Corps veteran, Rory is passionate about the issues that impact our service members, veterans, and their families, and she has focused much of her professional life tackling these issues. Welcome, Rory. It is so good to see you, and thank you so much for all you do for military families. I'm just delighted you're here.
Thank you so much for having me today, Sally.
Well, there's no one who knows more about military families than you do, for sure. Would you like to start with an opening statement and tell us about joining forces? I mean, we remember it very fondly from the Obama administration, but why is joining forces just as relevant now as it was 4 years ago or even 8 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. I think, I'm so thrilled to be here as Executive Director of Joining Forces. As everyone knows, the Bidens are a military family, so these issues are near and dear to their hearts. And, while we started this in 2011, some of the work that we're doing today is still just as relevant or more important than it was then. With 20 years of sustained warfare, families are really on the forefront of service alongside their service members. And so for us, it's really imperative that we came back to the table right away, started our joining forces work, and started really thinking about where we should dig in terms of policy and programming. So just really thrilled to be here today with you, Sally, and to talk more about this work.
Well, I think you said something really important, and that is that, in 10 years, our service members and families are still doing the exact same thing. And I think that's something so important for our civilian community to understand, that even though we may be pulling out of different areas of the world, that our military still continues to train and to be separated from their families on an ongoing basis. They always have been and they always will. So that's a very important reason for joining forces to stand up and to continue to support. With that being said, how are military family connectedness and military readiness tied together? How do those two things kind of merge, if you will?
Well, I think that's a really great question. And for a long time, I think people felt like military family programming was a nice to do or something that felt really good. And while that's absolutely true, this is a nice thing to do, and it does feel good to support this community. Ensuring our families have what they need to thrive is actually a national security imperative. And if you think about it, that's pretty common sense. If we want to recruit and retain the best and brightest in our military, we can't put them in a situation where they have to choose between their desire to serve and love of country and the well-being of their families. And I think we're really at a critical juncture in time now where all of the service branches acknowledge that family-related quality of life issues can impact retention. And we're being thoughtful about how those family difficulties can interfere with readiness, because service members aren't able to fully focus on their mission if they're really concerned about something that's going on at home. And I know, and as all my colleagues do too, that organizations like United Through Reading are providing great programming that allows military families and military connected kiddos to improve their well-being. And you shared with me some really great statistics, and the one that just comes through every time is that 100% of your participants said that the Read Aloud program not only improved morale for each individual, but for the whole family as a unit. And thinking through service as a holistic family choice is so important, and making sure that we're taking care of our service member all the way down to our smallest military kid is just incredibly important as we think about national security.
That's really well said. And I have heard General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, say that exactly what you said more than once, Rory, that if his service members know that their families are being taken care of and that their morale is strong. And then they can stay focused on the mission. And then that makes the mission successful, but it also saves lives, if you will. So you put it together beautifully. What are some of the ways that the Biden administration and joining forces is working to support military families? I know you said that the Bidens are very supportive. They are a military family, and we know that as well. But what are some of the specific ways that they're really focused on this?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. Dr. Biden recently laid out the priorities for joining forces in this administration's effort. And really, since the beginning of the administration, day one, I came on board on day one to start this work. We have really spent a lot of time meeting with families, caregivers, survivors, academic experts, organizational leaders, government officials, to really make sure that what we were going to focus on in joining forces were the right issue areas and that the approaches we were taking made sense. And so those listening sessions really were informative to us. And so through that scoping exercise, is what I would actually call it, we kind of scoped in on the needs of families will be at the center of what we do. And so for us, this iteration of joining forces will focus on the needs of military and veteran families, caregivers, and survivors. And the three policy areas that we'll be focused on will be employment, entrepreneurship, and then military child education and health and well-being. And Dr. Biden always likes to say, we're not here to tell military families what they need. We're here to listen to them and to be responsive to the needs that they share with us. And so while we're really in the early days still, we are working across all of our federal agencies and the White House to make sure that we have a real coordinated whole of government approach to the way that we support military families. And that's critical because military families are people too. So while most people think, okay, when I'm a military family, where do I go to get support? Okay, that's the Department of Defense. Or I'm a veteran family, I go through the VA and the caregiver program. But military families are interacting with the federal government every day because they're American working families. And so we want to make sure that within our government structure, that our friends at all of the agencies are keeping military families in mind and their unique situations in mind as they develop policies and programs that are designed to support all Americans. And then specifically, along with our colleagues in the National Security Council, we've convened an interagency policy committee to really take a deep look at what government is doing already and is planning to do in the future to support these communities. And this also gives us the opportunity to explore actions that agencies can take together to be collaborative and smart about the way that we're doing this work and making sure that there's crosstalk of experts so that we are being really smart about the way we support this community. And I think, as you saw in early joining forces, you'll see again in this joining forces, we'll continue to reach out to our partners in the nonprofit and academic and corporate sectors to really think through innovative solutions to challenges faced by families in the areas that we're honing in on.
I was thinking, as you talked about going out on the listening tours, if you will, to hear and to listen, that many of the things I suspect that you hear is what you heard 10 years, 11 years, 12 years ago. Some of those things haven't changed for our military families, but I also suspect that you found new things, different things. We're in a different time in our country. So I applaud you for not just resting on old information, but continuing to seek new information in terms of what our military families need. And I'm also delighted to hear that you're working to get the holistic approach as opposed to just a single silo. So I think that's excellent news. You mentioned that the Joining Forces initiative is focused on 3 different areas, and obviously my ears perked up for the third one, which is military children's education. That's a top concern for military families year after year for a number of reasons that we both know. But what are some of the ways that we can help support their education as they move over and over and over again, or they face stressful situations like deployments? What are the things that you're looking at, and what are the things that you can share with us that will help us?
Sure. As you said, military child education is an issue area that comes up again and again. And as we're out on the road, we hear from families all the time talking about the challenges that their kiddos face when they move from state to state or even the US to abroad. And, whether it's helping smooth the transition so that your child can play the sport they love in the next place they go, or they have a disability and need a 504 or an IEP that transitions, we know that there's so much more work that can be done in this space. I think what folks don't necessarily realize is that there's a military connected child in every school district in America. Every single one has at least one military connected kid. And even if there isn't a base or a huge active duty community, those children are still in these schools. And that's why it's been really important for us to think through how we're working with educators to make sure that they have the tools in their hands to help military kids settle into a new classroom and feel like a part of a new school system, but also so that they understand some of the unique challenges that our kiddos face. And, in addition to working with educators, we're working with organizations like yours to think about things like enrichment activities or fostering networks of connections in new communities. Those are all things that can help make a military child thrive and make the challenges that they face just a little bit easier, because you see these incredible, well-supported military kids have such grit and resilience, but it doesn't need to be harder than it is already. So, again, we're still in early days, but really thinking through how to effectively work with our partners in education and also with our partners at the DoD and the Department of Education to think about how can we make this just a little bit easier, because it doesn't have to be this challenging every time a kiddo moves. And we should be trying our hardest to figure out solutions that work for that.
That's great news. And yes, at least one military child in every single school in this country. That's an incredible opportunity, quite frankly, to be able to share more about military families and the stressors that they experience. So I'm delighted to hear that you're going out to the schools, working with the teachers, the administrators. Even if there's just one child in that school, that's an important child, and it's a great opportunity to share the military experience of a child.
Sure.
As military members return home from deployment, how can our nation continue to support those families?
I think, Sally, it's a common misconception that the challenges that are faced by military families are solely related to deployments or op tempo. And while some of the challenges faced by our community are certainly exacerbated by those situations, some of the things that we face as a military community that are challenging are really just a function of military life. We pick up and move every two or 3 years. We go through long separations from our family members while they're in training. So even when deployments slow and we see service members return to a more garrison-centric life, these challenges are still going to exist. And I think that's what we know really impacts military spouses and military children, whether it's a military spouse whose career doesn't port from one base to the next, or a military child who has an IEP or a 504 and it's too hard, it's hard in the next school system. We see a lot of families do things like geo-batching, where they stay in one place because the schools are good or the career is good for the military spouse while the service member goes on to their new duty station. And so it really, for us in joining forces and us in the federal government, it's thinking through how do we bridge some of those divides and create opportunities for thriving despite some of the challenges that will always be inherent to military life. So I think, providing support for military families, both from the government, but also from our nonprofits and our community partners, is really critical. And, that could look like a teacher welcoming a military connected child into their classroom and really knowing what it means for that child to also be serving, or for a corporate partner to say, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to create some remote work opportunities for military spouses, or whether it's folks like you at United Through Reading, creating these great opportunities for kids to connect with their parent when they're apart. I think those are things that will always be useful and necessary as families experience this lifestyle, which in some ways can be so enriching and amazing, and in other ways, challenging and hard.
Really well said. I mean, just hitting home one more time to our citizens in our country who don't understand military life that it's not just the deployment, it's not just the separation. It is the military lifestyle just in general. And to help
Absolutely.
them, yeah, and to help them understand that is so important. So again, joining forces is right where you need to be and doing right what you should be doing. So very grateful for you, and I want to thank you so much for this discussion, for your insight. I always learn from you when I talk to you and hear what you're doing. So great job, great work. You and Dr. Biden are doing wonderful things for our military families. United Through Reading is very grateful to know you, and we stand at the ready to help you in anything that you need to do as we march forward smartly to thank our military families. So thank you so much for encouraging members of the public and private sector to find ways, big and small, to support our service members, our veterans, their families, and their caregivers. We're really grateful for you, Rory.
Thank you so much for having me today, Sally. And if I could say one last thing, because if I didn't, I think my boss would be upset. Dr. Biden always says, do what you do best. And so every American has something they can do to support a military family. And it doesn't matter who you are. You know a military family, you know a veteran family. You can do what you do best to support them.
That's a great saying. I've heard her say that before. United Through Reading has a very small mission, but we think we do what we do best, connecting families through stories and sharing books. So thank you for that. And now, to share more about the work being done on Capitol Hill in support of military families, I'm really pleased to welcome a longtime supporter of United Through Reading and the ranking member from the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Mike Rogers.
Deployment's really hard on military families, and UTR does a great job in making sure that while service members are deployed and away from their families, they're able to read aloud with their children to help them in their developmental process. UTR's mission is very important to our nation, and I appreciate them doing it, and I appreciate the service of our men and women who are sacrificing so much to keep us free and safe.
Thank you, Congressman Rogers. Before we conclude today's program, I'd like you to hear from one of our beneficiary families. Last fall, we were unable to hold our in-person storybook ball due to the pandemic, but we produced a virtual event and introduced several beneficiary families who shared their stories with our audience. The family of Navy Hospital Corpsman HM2 George Taylor used United Through Reading to stay connected during a 10-month deployment when he served on the USS Abraham Lincoln. The Taylors had learned about UTR through social media and a visit from the UTR mobile story station that went to Hancock Elementary School in San Diego, and where over 98% of the children come from military families. Sherelle and their sons, then 8-year-old George and 5-year-old Ryan, told George Sr. to find UTR on board and make a recording. Little did they know that he had heard about the program as well, and soon thereafter, their recording showed up in the mail. And here to tell you the impact that United Through Reading has had on their family is the Taylor family.
Hi, we're the Taylor family. We're here in San Diego, California. We're with the USS Abraham Lincoln. We're here today. We just want to talk a little bit about the great wonderful opportunity that United Through Reading provided us, especially on this past deployment. I had the opportunity to be able to read to my boys a really good book, and United Through Reading was able to send that to them from all the way across the Middle East to them, for them to have face-to-face contact with me and be able to communicate with us. It was a great joy for our sons to be able to have that, and more or less it was a great important opportunity for me to be able to spread that amongst my shipmates and my friends and colleagues on the boat.
I had an opportunity of connecting with United Through Reading through Instagram, and that's where we learned about the program. And I was able to kind of communicate with my husband that, he could participate in the video / reading a book for the boys. And so he emailed me back stating that he was able to do so and that the boys would be getting something special in the mail.
We were at different time zones, so I just figured if I can do this time, the story, they can definitely read it during story time. My hope was to be able to get more and more so they'd have multiple books to read. And by the time I get home, they could be, fluently reading those books to me.
Yeah, they would play it very frequently. I know Ryan is the youngest, so I think that just helped him just soothe his soul a little bit as we, let the deployment pass by. So he would go to it by himself. He would just pop it in the DVD and he would just play it.
We're definitely extended beyond when we're supposed to be home, missed all the holidays, and so this was a key element to help with that.
It was just a wonderful opportunity to connect with everybody. It's a great connection for us.
I like United Reading.
I just want to thank each and every one that's with United Through Reading for the opportunity that we had, and we're definitely blessed with that opportunity.
Our families are really what it's all about. I'm so pleased to have been able to share the Taylor story with you and to host the critical conversation with Rory Brosius. Thank you, Rory, for your time, and to Congressman Smith and Rogers for participating in today's program as well. Throughout our webinar series, we've established that literacy is a foundational skill for lifelong learning, and that reading aloud lays the groundwork for future educational success for our military kiddos. And while military service members will continue to serve, continue to deploy, and continue to relocate their families, our 1.5 million military children will continue to face the challenges of new schools and missing parents and disrupted routines. But with the right tools and resources, like United Through Reading, our military families and children can learn resiliency and strengthen their readiness through reading. Additionally, the corporate community's support for organizations like United Through Reading is a key component in bolstering the educational building blocks for military children and helping maintain high levels of family quality of life. And finally, a giant thank you to our nation's leaders from the White House and Congress for supporting the whole military family in their work. Thank you all for joining us to view this webinar. I invite you to join us for the next event in our series, Our Tribute to Military Families, on July 21st, which will be streamed on our website. And I'd like to provide a reminder that you can watch all of our previous webinars in the series on our website at utr.org/webinars. And you can also keep in touch with us and learn about our upcoming programs through our website and social media. Thank you again for your support of military families, and thank you for watching.